What's up, humans, and welcome to a new Psicoactivo. Happy Thursday, everybody. Okay, so I managed to get a chance to speak to attorney Josh McDowell. This opportunity came about thanks to my friend and collaborator, Gonzalo Chavez, who asked me if I wanted to co host a Twitter space with him and interview Josh. And most of the questions came from Gonzalo, but I had very specific questions to ask Josh because some of the questions that I've asked the people that are involved in the Nazca Tridactyls case were not answered. And I want answers for those questions. And you will notice that these are probably very uncomfortable for somebody like Josh, who came into the game a little bit late alongside his father. I wasn't, and I am not saying that he is in any way responsible for anything, but I did want to know his perspective on how the little bodies were transferred from Peru to Mexico, what he thinks about the Vaquero Mafia, if he thinks that there may be a corruption component to all of this. He seemed and sounded very uncomfortable with those questions, but I think it was necessary to ask him that because his perspective is very important because he is part of the American side that is trying to investigate this. And I was very happy to see that he still remains skeptical. He won't tell you that these are aliens or anything like that. And he was very respectful, very cordial. I really liked this conversation. And there was even a Q&A section at the very end. I have express permission from Gonzalo to share the entire space. So I added many pictures to the space, to the audio, and I hope you guys enjoy it. If you like the content you see, I'm going to ask you to like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. That's all you need to do in order to help us, and it is what helps us the most. So thank you. But if you want to support the channel in other ways, there's a few links down there you can choose from. You can become a member on YouTube, or you can support us through KGRA. Anything you choose to do is always appreciated, so thank you. And that's it for me today on this video, but I'll see you guys in the next one. Remember, stay curious and inquisitive like Josh McDowell. Always. I'll leave you with the space with Josh. Thank you to Gonzalo. Bye.
Gonzalo, I could hear you for a second, then it cut out.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I got you now.
Okay. I'm just waiting on. Hey, Pavel.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yep. Hey, Josh.
Nice. Hey, good evening. Good evening. Is my mic sounding okay?
Yep.
Good.
So I guess we'll just give it like a few more minutes or seconds and then we'll start.
Sounds great.
Awesome, man. Thank you for joining, guys. We have Josh McDowell willing to do an interview with us. And also have Pavel Ibarra joining us for this space. And so, Josh, I thought the way I would start was just asking you a simple question like, how did you get started? How did you find out about the discovery? And how did you guys get involved?
Yeah, so pretty, interesting. I think it's a lot of the way a lot of people got involved early, and that's, hearing Jaime Maussan. I had seen a clip on social media of Jaime's Mexican congressional hearing, where he presented the bodies, two of the bodies. It's the one where Ryan Graves also was there in Mexico to come down to testify. And I'd seen the bodies and thought it was very strange. And I saw a short clip and I went and found it on YouTube or somewhere else, watched the whole hearing. And at the end of the hearing, he says something to the effect of, we welcome any experts or forensic investigators to come and examine these bodies themselves. And so my father, former president of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, a forensic odontologist, head of forensics at the University of Colorado. I called him up and said, "Hey, have you seen this?" I sent him a link. What do you think? And so he watched it, called me back, and said, "It's interesting." I said, "Do you want to go take a look?" So I reached out to Jaime, and later that day we were on the horn, and he had invited us down to come take a look. So that's the genesis of my involvement.
And were you guys allowed to see like Clara and Mauricio?
So yes, ultimately I've seen them. My dad hasn't. Um, the You're talking about the bodies that
Or
are in
shown in the
Mexico
Mexican
City.
Congress?
Yeah, yeah. So I did see those, but I didn't see those till a couple months ago.
Okay.
I was in Mexico City. Actually, maybe a lot of you have seen this if you're following the topic. The Bugosphere conference is, with, Congressman Burleson, and there's a lot of people there. But those bodies were actually brought to Jaime Maussan's studios, and I was able to see them there.
Did you
Can
also get
I?
to see the giant hand?
Yes, yes, as well.
That head is an artisany, right?
Now, did you say giant head or
The
hand?
giant hand.
Hand,
Oh, the
yes.
hands. Okay.
Yeah.
What do you think about
That
those?
The giant hands?
Yes.
You know, I'm skeptical of the giant hands. They're interesting. Specifically, I've seen several. I think it's good to be skeptical and keep an open mind, and that's how I try to approach all of this. Pavel, is, that's just kind of the way my brain works. It's good to, not accept everything at face value. It's good to say, let's look at the science. And so I've seen X-rays of different hands, but what a lot of people have to understand is we're not dealing in absolutes. We're not everything is going to be artisanal or a real body, a real once living organism. We know that there's both. And part of the problem is the provenance of these bodies is a lot of them are coming from the same sources. And so when we have some bodies that are, definitely once living organisms, real biological remains versus some things that are, artisanal or created, we know both of those things exist. And they've been out in the market for years and they've been bought and sold. And so you have to look at each individual thing as its own individual creation or its own individual entity, let's say. Um, because a lot of people will say, okay, well, that's a blank. And maybe that individual thing is what someone says it is, whether that's an artisanal thing or something that's made up of parts of something else, or if it's the remains of a once living organism. So each thing has to be looked at individually to make a determination. And it gets a little tricky because the source, are oftentimes the same sources of where things are coming from in Peru. And there's people that have collected these in multiple things and have resold them and put them out on the market. And we don't have that archaeological site that I wish we had. We don't have that location where, scientists and archaeologists, anthropologists found them, collected them, cataloged them, and studied them in situ. We don't have that. And so what we do have is we have a lot of different parts and pieces and bodies and artifacts and other interesting things. I guess they would fit into the artifact category floating around. So we have to be very careful when we're talking about each individual piece or entity is to make a determination on what that thing is.
The reason I asked the question though is because there's been a black market of these artifacts and remains for decades now, and there is still like a lot of nebulous areas around that, as in where who really is in control of where the site is, and who really is calling the shots on that. Because I know that there's a mafia of the Huaqueros. I'm from
Right.
Mexico. I'm from Mexico, so there's a lot of that here in Mexico as well. There's a lot of sites, megalithic sites that have a lot of these black markets going on. So I wanted to ask you, how do you navigate that? Because for a lawyer who's not from Latin America, I would imagine that you have to be extra careful not to get burned and not to get your father burned.
Well, yeah, and Pavel, that's actually a lot of questions, I think, and I think I have to kind of separate those things out. Now, in every situation, I mean, we go to Mexico, we go to Egypt, Peru, wherever we're at, where there's ancient sites, there's going to be grave robbers, and this has happened for not decades, for thousands of years, where ancient sites have had things that are treasures or artifacts or mummies, and this has happened everywhere. Like I said, Mexico, Egypt, Peru are all great examples of this. And yeah, we know that there's a lot of bad actors involved. There's no question about that. And there's a lot of when you've got bad actors, you're going to have a lot of chicanery and a lot of things that are not above board, let's say. And so, yes, there is trafficking of items. And my personal belief is that early on in this case, talking about the Nazca bodies, that there's been a lot of introduction of other things that have been sold and sold many times in past hands that are not genuine. I've seen quite a few things myself, both artifacts and let's call them dolls that I don't believe are ancient. And that, it becomes tricky because you have to, once again, you have to take each individual thing individually to make a decision on that. And some of these things, Pavel, are very easy to see and very easy to determine. For example, we'll talk about the bodies that were shown by Flavio Estrada at that press conference in January of 2024. Those are clear artisanal creations. You can spot those, a child could spot those and eyeball them and say, hey, those aren't real. Those were never once living organisms. But there are some creations that are much more sophisticated that I also believe are artisanal. Now, not nearly as sophisticated as bodies like Maria or Montserrat, Santiago, Sebastian. Those are clearly once living organisms. And so I think, once again, you have to look at each individual creation. And some of these you're going to have to CT, you're going to have to maybe do under X-ray or fluoroscopy, which is like a live X-ray, to be able to see inside of them. Because a lot of them are, not a lot of them, all of them are covered with this, what's called diatomaceous earth. It's that light gray, whitish, clay-like material that's put all over the bodies. And it obfuscates a lot of different things. It obfuscates the skin, sometimes the eyes, the lips, the ears, the fingerprints. I mean, it's caked on there pretty good. And it's caked on some of the things that, once again, we know are creations or manufactured bodies. And so it gets tricky. And so to get burned, I mean, it's something that we say, let's follow the data, let's look at the evidence, and then, give an opinion. And that's, I think, why a lot of people maybe have been like, well, what are the answers? And the answers are very, very complex. And that's why also, we've been slow to say, hey, here's a definitive answer, because and I'm saying that as a team with all the docs, believe that there needs to be additional testing to make a final determination on what each individual entity or body is or was.
Your turn, Gonzalo. I'll follow up later.
Yeah. So my question was, when you arrived at the university, you were allowed to see Maria. Were you also allowed to see
Yes.
Guaguita, Alberto, Victoria?
Yes.
Did you study all of them or just Maria?
So all four bodies are, Gonzalo. They're there at the university. They're in the chancellor's office. I think we'd say chancellor in English. So it's kind of the executive offices of the university right there in the middle of downtown Ica. And it's a big kind of open area, and they've got them behind this red curtain in the back, and they're all in glass cases, and so it goes from left to right. Wawita, Maria, and then I'm trying to remember which is the one that's got the
Alberto.
knees up without a head.
Oh,
Okay,
that's
yeah.
Victoria.
So Victoria, then Alberto. And yeah, we're able to look at all of them. I mean, honestly, the university rolled out the red carpet for us, and they were awesome. Dr. Zuniga, everybody was so kind and helpful. And that they brought in a fluoroscope for the docs to X-ray. Fluoroscope's the right word, but it looks like an X-ray. The bodies, and they were able to use the fluoroscope on all the bodies. I will tell you, we were there for a couple hours. The most time by a very large margin was spent on Maria. That was for all of the docs, the body that they were most interested in. And that's the first bodies that we saw. So that was our introduction. When we landed in Lima, we got on cars and headed right to Ica. So we had a very long day. Flying from Denver to Mexico City to Lima, getting in a car and going directly to Ica was a long trip. And so first thing in the morning, we were at the university looking at the bodies. And we did get a good chance to look at all four of those bodies, but the vast majority of the time was spent on Maria. And
Were you all shocked when you guys saw Maria?
say that again?
Were you guys shocked when you guys saw Maria?
Yeah, I mean, I will tell you, she's exactly what I expected her to be from what I had seen. I mean, it was something, we say the word shocked, it was something that certainly none of us, me, my father, Dr. Caruso, Dr. Rodriguez had seen before. But we had been given materials to study before we went down. So we were able to see some imaging, quite a bit of photography as well before we went. So we did know what to expect, but it's different to see them in person. And, um, it's incredible to look at the hands and the feet and the head and to, touch and look at these bodies are very different than, any other bodies that any of the docs had seen. I mean, Dr. Caruso's the medical examiner of Denver. I asked him, he said he's done about 4,000, examinations or autopsies. And, my father's an assistant medical examiner. In his retirement, he still works. And so he's an assistant medical examiner up in Denver and does special cases all over the country. But no, I mean, none of them had ever seen a body like any of these bodies before. They're very different than, anything in the fossil record that we were aware of or that we'd studied. Now, they're also very humanoid. A lot of these bodies, the teeth and the bone structure, other than the hands and the feet, are very, very similar. Let's just say consistent with human anatomy. Some of the differences are obviously the way the hands and the feet are with 3 fingers, with that extra, knuckle or phalange, finger bone. Same with the feet. The head shape. It's interesting. We know that the Nazca and Paracas people both did head binding, so that's not super out of the ordinary. I mean, if you've been to the Paracas Museum, you'll see dozens and dozens of skulls that are shaped very strangely. And that's been a common practice among many, many cultures all over the Americas and in North Africa. We have examples, or actually all over Africa, we have examples of head binding. So the head could be explained, but they're not much in the way of ears, like the external ears, the auricles of the ears, not much in the way of noses. The orbitals, the eye sockets, if you will, seem to be a little bit bigger than we'd expect to see on some of the bodies. So there are some things that are different and interesting.
All right. Thank you, Josh. I wanted to ask you because of when I said burned, this is what I meant. Okay, so
Yeah.
I've been interviewing a lot of the people involved in this. I got to interview Maussan, who was my first guest. I got to interview Joyce Mantilla. I got to interview David Velasco, and I got to interview Martina Achirica. For me, one of the most important data points of the entire case is Achirica, because there's something that happened when the bodies of the smaller beings were taken from Peru to Mexico. And when I tried to ask Martin during our interview if there was any paper trail of how these bodies were transferred from Peru to Mexico, he wasn't able to give me a straight answer. And as a lawyer yourself, I would imagine that that is one of the concerns that you probably had at the beginning. I just wanted to know if you know more information about that, how those bodies were initially transferred. Um, I wanted to know that if you had any info on that.
Yeah, I do know. I don't know if oftentimes, Pavel, I'm in an interesting position because as an attorney, people will sometimes speak to me as an attorney. And so, with that being said, it's difficult. Do I know the answer? Yes, I know the answer. I had nothing to do with that. That was done well before my involvement in the case. In fact, that's how I even learned about it, was the bodies were at the Mexican congressional hearing. I can tell you that neither myself nor my father have any intent to move any organic materials out of Peru. We would not without express written consent from the government of Peru. And that's why we went down to testify in front of Peruvian Congress. That's why we've written multiple letters. That's why we've dealt with attorneys in Peru. And like I said, testified in front of the Committee of Cultural Patrimony in Peru to ask for permission to be able to move a body, because
Yeah.
it's in contradiction to a treaty that we have with Peru. It's also in contradiction to federal law and customs, U.S. customs, to bring in any sort of ancient foreign material, including fossils, relics, anything that's pre-Columbian. And we have that treaty with many of the Central or Latin American countries. And so, what other people have done or do, I've learned of a lot of things that I don't necessarily agree with. I would not have anything to do with that, nor would my father. Um, but we do and have asked and hoped that bodies could be brought to the States for testing, but that would be with, done through U.S. Customs and done through the Ministry of Culture or other competent Peruvian government entities before anything like that was done. I just, I'd love to get answers. I'd love to investigate this, but not at the expense of breaking the law or at the expense of doing something that would be considered unethical or even disrespectful of the culture. I mean, obviously the Nazca people are no longer exist, but with the indigenous cultures, their history and their culture is incredibly important to them. And our position has been, we want to do everything we can to respect that and to respect their customs and to do everything legally, scientifically, and ethically the right way. There's a lot of shortcuts. I know there are. I know a lot of people have taken them, and I strongly am against any kind of shortcuts that people have taken to do surreptitious things or to bring things into the United States in contravention of international treaties and U.S. law. I'm strongly against it.
And Mexico also has a treaty though with Peru. That's why I ask, because that's not completely clear. And I like your answer. Thank you for answering that. It always becomes really difficult when I ask this specific question, because it's really not a straight answer of what happened. And I know that there were attempts from Jaime Maussan's team and Martina Achirica's team to try and make this legally, but they were ignored by the Peruvian government. I do know that. So in terms of how this is going, this legal transfer of remains or artifacts or whatever, because I know that from the Jesse Michaels documentary, he spoke about the Colossal company. And that was really interesting to hear. I don't know if there is already movement going on within the Peruvian government to probably make that happen, because I know Colossal already has some agreements with the Peruvian government of other types of species or fossils. Do you know if there's any advancement there that maybe you can tell us about?
Well, yeah. I mean, here's what I can tell you is I can only talk on what I know. And um, it's historically, it has been done. I mean, a lot of Max Planck Institute, University of California, Yale University. There's a lot of groups that have done previous work with taking organic samples to the United States and to Europe, by the way, to be tested for DNA and to find out. For example, I'll use this example, and I've used this before in another interview. Is UC Santa Cruz? I think it was Santa Cruz. Anyways, one of the UCs um, has an ancient DNA lab, and they were doing work through Machu Picchu. So through some of the bodies that were found on the outskirts of Machu Picchu, there was genetic material that was brought to one of the University of California schools, and work was done on those to determine, where the people that were living on the outskirts of Machu Picchu came from. They were trying to determine if they were, in fact, Incan or if they were something else. And interestingly, it's a great study. You can see that a lot of the peoples that were found outside of the walls were from all over. It's actually pretty cool. Pretty cool study they did just a few years ago. And so we know it's been done. We know similar things have happened, but those are done with the permission of the Ministry of Culture. And it's tricky because, since these bodies were found in 2015, I think there's been 24, 25 different ministers of culture in the last 10 years. This is a cabinet level position in Peru. And, a few of them have only served for a few days or weeks. And there's a lot of turnover in that position. And so even since I've been involved, I think there's been 3. And it's sometimes hard to get a straight answer. And these bodies are controversial. This is not a, settled topic where we're trying to look at some discrete issue of, certain bodies that were found in, the region of Machu Picchu. And these are something a little bit different that's raised the consternation and ire of quite a few people down there. And rightfully so. I'm not saying I don't understand where they're coming from. Our position repeatedly has been, both to Congress and to the Ministry of Culture, is we want to collaborate with a capital C. It's not our position to do anything that they don't agree with. Our position has been, let's work together to get answers. We want to do things the right way.
Thank you, Josh.
So I had a question, Josh. When you arrived into Peru, you guys were shown Maria, and then afterwards it seems you guys were shown Montserrat, Sebastian, and Santiago. What was that process like? How long were you guys with those specimens? I saw that Dr. Salce was with you, so was Dr. McDowell. I think Dr. Caruso and Rodriguez were also there. Were they surprised by the results? Was there any specimen that specifically stood out to you?
Yeah. So some of the bodies, all the bodies that you just mentioned, Gonzalo, are not at the university. Those are in, I'll say, a private collection right now. And so there's quite a few specimens out there, and a lot of people, for example, and I'll give you a shout out, Gonzalo, for tridactyls.org, which is a really great website that Gonzalo's put together. I'm sure most of the people listening today have been there. If you haven't, go tridactyls.org. There's some great images and photographs, and it's phenomenal. He did a great job. So a lot of these bodies, all the ones that Gonzalo just mentioned, are not at the university, and those were brought to a facility where we had access to a CT machine, and so we were able to CT the bodies. And the one that stands out to me, and oh, by the way, yes, Dr. Rodriguez was there, Dr. Caruso, my father, Dr. Zalce, were there, as was Dr. David Vela, or Ruiz Vela was there too. We did get a chance to physically examine, photograph, and then look at them under live CT. And so when I've said before to, a lot of people are like, well, this could be faked, or those images are, computer images. I will tell you that myself, my father, and the other doctors I just mentioned were all there while the CTs were done live. And so a lot of the images that people have seen of these DICOMs, which are just computerized images made from CT images or imaging, those are real. We saw them done live and in our presence with the machine going, with the body in there. And the one that stands out to me is, I think, the one that stands out to most everybody, and that's Montserrat. She's very well preserved, and I say she because she's pregnant. And she's definitely pregnant. I know there's been a lot of, talk about, is she not? We could clearly see that there was a fetus in her belly. So the fact that she's as well preserved as she is, and that she's clearly and demonstrably pregnant, and we can see the fetus quite well under CT. To me, it's fascinating. So that, to me, is the one that was the most interesting.
Is there like any smell coming from the specimens when you get close to them? Do they just smell like something, or there's no smell associated to them?
So, yeah, they do smell. Maria, I would say, had the heaviest smell. Um, some of the other ones, like Montserrat, doesn't smell as much, but I I took a whiff. I mean, that was something that was interesting to me too, and I was up close. And Maria, I think before I've said it, she smelled kind of like wet gym socks. It had, I mean, there was an odor there, and it was strong. But and I've unfortunately smelled a lot of decaying bodies in my career, and in the I'm former law enforcement, for those who don't know, but also grew up in the house of a medical examiner and have been to the morgue many, many times. But no, it's not. it doesn't smell like a decaying body, obviously. I mean, these things are thousands of years old, but they do have a smell to them. And it's, like I said, maybe like I don't know, nothing like I've really ever smelled. It's acrid. It's like gym socks, maybe. It's not a pleasant smell, but there is a little bit of like kind of sweetness to it too. I mean, it's hard to describe. It's, maybe a little bit of like a hint of urine kind of smell.
That's kind of like what everybody's told me. And I think it's like something I would like to experience too, just because our senses matter, you know, you would be able to tell if it's real or fake depending on it.
Well, yeah,
So,
I mean, it's taste, touch. Well, not taste in this case, but our senses, make a big difference. And so, yeah, certainly the smell is there on the different bodies, but Maria was the one that was the smelliest, I guess you could say.
and then when you went there for the November hearing, you guys were surprised with Antonio, Paloma, and Joyce. How was that experience like? Did you expect to see them after the hearing or before the hearing? Was it a surprise to you and your father?
Yeah, so we were in Peru on that trip, I think, for 23 hours. Um, we had we were flying from Denver and we got delayed on our way to Houston and missed the flight. There was a weather delay in Denver and we missed the flight by minutes. So we didn't get down to the hearing. I think we were supposed to be there at 8 and the hearing started at 9, or maybe the hearing, I don't know. It was very early in the morning and we arrived at 12:31. So my dad and I had been up for quite a while, and we were hoping to see the bodies the day before because we were going to have 2 days in Lima, but it obviously didn't work out. We were stuck in Houston, so we got in early. Didn't even go to sleep. Um, got in, got up, got ready, and went down to Congress to testify, and then later that day is the same day we were able to see the bodies um, at a private location. It was actually home, and back on the plane. So we were there for less than 24 hours, but we did see uh, quite a few specimens that day, um, and body parts as well. There was some parts that we were able to examine that were not attached to an entire body. And the bodies you mentioned, we did see. You were correct on all those.
You were able to see the heads that because I know Dr. Sanchez sent me some pictures of a loose head that he was allowed to study. Um, that head looked weird.
Yes, yeah, we did see a head that day, more than one. Um, I have to go look at my pictures, my photographs, to remember all of the pieces and parts we saw that day because I don't remember off the top of my head because there was quite a few. But yeah, there was an interesting head, uh, interesting shaped head. This isn't one of the giant heads. It was a regular sized human head, but had a little bit of an interesting shape to it.
So in total, what would you say because I know they say they've seen artifacts. I've asked Dr. Sanchez, for example, and he said that he hasn't seen any technology, but there's indications that there have been technology found from Mario. I don't know if they're like just telling me their experience from talking to Mario and from like hearing so much from Mario. It sounds like he's kind of like tends to exaggerate things. So my question is like, have you personally seen any technology that has surprised you? In Peru, for example, have you been shown any pictures of stuff like that?
Well, technology, I'm trying to, I mean, nothing advanced, if that's what you're asking, Gonzalo. No, watches or cell phones or anything mechanical. I have seen in person, and I have seen many photographs, a few things in person of artifacts like non-biologics, let's say. And a lot of them, they're little pieces of gold, little like stamped gold pieces. There's some ceramics and stone. And here again, we have an issue of these things were being sold for $5 and $10 at the beginning. And so do I have a thought that a lot of these were created to kind of cash in on the mummy craze? I do. Some of them are shaped like dinosaurs or classic gray alien heads or UFOs, like stuff that to me kind of, I'm a little, incredulous of, that these are artifacts, that were once or were made by these organisms. I have a hard time believing that. But because once again, our source is Mario. Mario told me personally, and by the way, I didn't mention this before. I interviewed him for over an hour, and then spoke to him privately for quite a while we were at the University of Ica. He just showed up while we were there, and I got to talk to him at length about a lot of these questions. But so, yeah, it's hard to believe that a lot of these items are the genuine artifact. So I've seen, hammered metal, gold, and copper. I've seen ceramic, stone, and I've seen another piece that's very weird. I don't know. Once again, I'm not allowed. I'd be talking out of school on this one, but interesting things. But technology, no, nothing advanced. No TI 800 calculators or watches or anything like that. Nothing even in that category.
Would you say that your thought process on our place in the universe has changed since you got involved with this discovery? Would you say that if you were asked, are we alone in the universe, would you be more implied to say we're not?
Well, I would say I'd be more inclined, Gonzalo, to say that there's things out there still to be found, that we haven't discovered everything. And since I've been involved with the mummies, um, I've been asked to look at some other things as well, and it's really fun and it's really interesting. I just I'm a curious guy, and I have an interest in these things, especially now that I've seen as some people know, we've seen other bodies, we've seen some other artifacts, and we've been asked to help on some other strange phenomenon, let's say. And so I would say that I'm much more inclined to believe that there's things out there that we haven't found yet. And I mean, we know this, that, even in the past 20 years, we found different kinds of hominids. Um, we've, like the hobbits, the Homo florensis, and there's all these different kinds of Homo blank erectus, and Homo florensis, and you name it. That there's things out there that maybe even lived concurrently with us thousands of years ago, and the Denisovans, and the list goes on of different hominids. Is that what these are? I don't know. I mean, I have ideas. I'm not going to tell you what my ideas are, because I mean, I have hypotheses that I've formed, and talking with the docs and seeing what I've seen. But, I want to follow the data. I want to follow the science. I want to see, DNA done the right way. I want to see, better imaging modalities done, and more professionals looking at these things before I confidently say these are X, Y, or Z. I have hypotheses. And, one of my hypotheses isn't, I don't believe that they're extraterrestrial. I mean, that's not my guess. It's not in my top few guesses. But I'm open to that. right? I mean, look, the galaxy that we live in is big, and the universe is much, much bigger. There's things that, why not? I think we can, keep an open mind to that. And, it's not my hypothesis that these are extraterrestrial, personally, but I'm, I'm open minded to whatever the data suggests to follow that.
So one of the questions I have from the audience is, why do you think there's so many bodies in the same location and they all have like different age ranges? Do you think it's like some sort of cemetery? What do you think it could be the cause of that?
Well, that's a complex question. My first answer is I don't trust the carbon 14. And I could stop there, but I'm not going to. I'm going to talk for another minute about this because it's kind of important. Um, Carbon 14 is a very tricky thing to do the right way. Any kind of contamination is going to give you a wrong answer. It has to be done appropriately in a clean room. And, kind of like DNA. If you're going to have any kind of contamination, especially with ancient DNA, it's going to be very, very tricky. So do I trust the carbon 14? No. Do I think it gives us a good age range? Maybe. I mean, I'll say I'd like to see the carbon 14 done again. So that's kind of my full answer. Um, my second answer is a little more complex than that. And, what I feel comfortable saying right now is I'm not certain they all were found in the same location.
That's the indication I've been getting as well. Seems like there's multiple locations where these beings are being found from.
I lean that direction, Gonzalo. I think that would make the most sense. And that's from, a lot of that is, what I've been told, what I've learned, what my research and investigation has led me to believe. Currently, I reserve the right to change my mind with new information, but that's what I currently believe. So let's say if the carbon 14 is accurate, let's assume that I think that there's going to be different locations and a wide age range in the bodies that have been discovered so far.
You
Okay.
wanted to ask a question, Pavel?
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, Josh, about the representatives that have been entertaining a lot of this because Representative Eric Burleson was in Mexico. He was with Jaime Maussan, with Dr. Stephen Greer, with Timothy Alberino, and he spoke about David Grush advising him to look at the larger bodies. I don't know if you had a chance to interact with Representative Burleson first.
Yeah, so Grush is actually a staffer for Burleson. He's on Burleson's staff. Um, and so, yes, I did actually have a nice talk with Congressman Burleson. He,
How do you see his position with the bodies? Because I gathered that he was a little bit disappointed that the larger bodies were not in Mexico. How do you see him? How did you see him interacting with everybody and with the hand in his hand? That picture.
yeah, so first off, he's a super cool guy. Very, very nice gentleman. Just a really good dude. I was able to talk to him quite a bit, had a meal or two with him. Really like Eric Burleson. And one of the things that, positive about Congressman Burleson is he was very open-minded, but he was also prepped. He was also well prepared. One of the reasons I went down to Mexico was to talk to him about this. That's one of the reasons. It was during the Bugosphere conference, and I was just invited to see it, so I thought, why not? But he was well read on the topic. He'd been clearly informed and had some very good questions about the bodies, about our investigation. And, you know, I've seen him talk in other things. I watched the congressional hearings last week. And, you know, nothing goes against what I saw in person from Congressman Burleson, is that he's, you know, wants answers. And is very, you know, for people that are in the, you know, disclosure space and are very much pushing for it. I think you probably already know this, but he's your ally. And he is very much pushing for this. I believe him to be earnest. From our personal conversation that we had, I believe him to be very earnest and wanting to find answers. Um, I don't know. That's the Josh McDowell take on it. But I do believe that. And so I think if, you know, the people that want to see, you know, the more truth to what's out there and what we know and have known, um, Burleson is one of the guys that's going to help get there for sure.
Do you think that if there are more hearings in Peru, probably having one of those Congress people there in the U.S., what do you think the effect would be if that happens?
Well, I don't think it would be anything but positive. You know, it's, I do feel sometimes that, you know, and I lived in Latin America for years too. And so, you know, I understand the culture is living there as a young man and in Brazil. And, you know, I do think that sometimes there's a little bit of maybe people not wanting, you know, big bad America to step in and say how things should be done and they're going to be done. And you know, telling Latin Americans how to run their shop, so to speak. And maybe I'm wrong on that, but that's a feeling that I've gotten sometimes, is that, you know, it's maybe that fiercely independent, you know, Latin, you know, vibe that says, you know, we can handle it ourselves. And I get that and I respect that. But I think there also is something to be added when, you know, whether it was Peruvians coming here or Mexicans coming to the States to offer assistance and to, you know, not pressure, but to say, hey, here's what we've learned and maybe we can help out. And I don't see that as anything but positive. Is let's collaborate and share. And, you know, from what I know of Eric Burleson, you know, I think he would be a great representative to do that. Like I said, he's open-minded, well prepared, and he's, you know, like I said, he was great to talk to in our conversation, and he knew the subject. I was really impressed.
Thank you.
I was told by Dr. Salce that when he briefed Eric Burleson, it was very clear that he was very well informed about the discovery, which you're saying the same thing. Were you with Dr. Salce during this conversation, or was it like just you and him talking afterwards that you're talking about? Because like I know from talking with Dr. Salce, he tells me that, you know, Eric was very well prepared. He was briefed by Dr. Salce on the discovery, what they found, videos of, you know, studies that they've done on the specimens. Uh, did you, were you there during that, or was that like something
There,
different?
it was kind of a weekend. There was multiple conversations at multiple times. If it was just Zalfe and Burleson, I was not in the room. Um, but I was with, and Zalfe was not present when I was talking to Burleson.
Okay. Yeah, just because from to Dr. Salce, he was telling me that Eric was very well informed and that he was asking great questions, that he came prepared, and that he was very impressed by that conversation he had with him. And it seems like you're saying the same thing. So that's further corroboration for me that, you know, he takes the time and prepares before he went to Latin America.
Yeah, that's my impression. That's completely fair. Completely fair.
So I know that one of the specimens that has been least talked about is Suye.
Hmm.
Have you had any experience with that specimen? And were you able to CT scan that specimen? Because I know when I was making the website, you saw Dr. David Vela wanted me to release, data about those specimens, but I didn't have any videos of CT scans or pictures to add on the website. That's why she hasn't been made or added on the website. Have you had any experience with that specimen or those kind of specimens?
I have not seen, we did not do CTs of Suye or any of the body types that look like that.
The proto
And
wings, like they're calling them.
yeah, yeah. So I have held and handled and physically examined and seen more than one. Yeah, I mean, they're weird. I mean, I can tell you one of our docs said, they look more reptilian than anything. The neck looked almost like a turtle. Um, they have, as you said, proto wings or proto fins. I don't know what they would be. I mean, they don't make a lot of sense to me. I don't, they certainly couldn't fly with those wings and the size and their weight. There's just, they're not flying. I'll tell you that. Um, and I don't know, they don't look like they can walk. They don't look like they could swim. I don't know what to make of them. They're very, very odd. Like I said, they look a little bird-like. I have seen X-rays of them. Um, one of the bodies was there when we were CTing the bodies, but we had a limited time and a lot to do. So we focused on some other ones at that point.
And so one of the most important studies is DNA studies. And I know that this is something that you've been working yourself on very hard on. Is there anything that you could tell the public about your work to get DNA studies? Something that you would like to share to the public regarding your efforts on that aspect?
Yeah, so I mean, what I can say, Gonzalo, is it's an ongoing concern. It's something that we continue to work on. It's not something that we've gone down and looked and just said, well, that's it. I mean, it's something that we've bought in on and said we'd like to help see it through. And and I do want people to know that we're not getting paid for any of this. I've spent, my own time and so has my father and the other docs, as well, that no one was paid for any of this. And, I don't get paid for my appearances. I don't get paid to go on podcasts. I don't ask for anything like that. And it's kind of become a little bit of a labor of love that we'd like to see answers, whatever they may be, because it's such an interesting case. And I believe it to be one of the most interesting forensic mysteries, the most interesting forensic mystery of our time. I just think it's fascinating. And I think there's answers that can be had. And so that kind of explains, my interest and my father's interest in the topic is it's real, it's solvable. Um, we can touch them and feel them, and the answer, I'll tell everybody, it's going to be very complex because there are different answers for the different body types. And it's very doable. So yeah, I mean, DNA gets tricky because you cannot bring any organic or material out without permission from Peru, and they don't have the capabilities in Peru to do the necessary ancient DNA work. Yeah, they have very limited instrumentalities at the Ministry of Culture. They have a few things that could give very limited answers, but not anything like what Colossal could do or anything like a genomics lab at a university could accomplish. So, could you get some limited answers? Sure. Um, but how it needs to be done is it needs to be in a peer-reviewed study done through a world-class genomics lab where the DNA has to be secured in the correct fashion, and it has to be ran through the right machines by the right experts. Then the data needs to be shared with other experts, and that's part of the peer review process. When you have something this interesting and this different, it's not like, where we've got a simple rape kit or something like that. I'm, talking as a former district attorney, where, hey, we send it to the lab, we have a sample on a rape kit, or we have a sample of blood or something like that, or even touch DNA on a gun. Those can all be done, I'm in Colorado, so those could be done at, one of the metro crime labs. We have the technology to do that. Ancient DNA is a very, very different animal. And so it needs to be done the right way. And there's a lot of things that keep us from doing that currently, and makes it very, very tricky. And a lot of that is, how do you follow the laws? But more importantly, how do you get answers by not doing anything you're not allowed to do? So, no, bodies currently, there's been no permission to move them out of the country. Kind of as Pavel was talking about, well, how did these bodies get to this location, or how did they get to wherever? And all I can say is I'm not the one moving them, and I'm not involved in that, and so I can't really speak too much on that.
If you were allowed to move a specimen out of Peru, do you have a choice? Would it be Maria or Montserrat or Santiago Sebastian? Do you have like an idea of which specimen you think would be the best?
Well, I do think that it would be, at whatever the Ministry of Culture allowed, is, I would love to have that opportunity to sit down and talk about it. I've had some limited discussions with some representatives from the government, both members of Congress and, I'll just say, others. And a lot of it is, the position has been not from Congress. There's members of Congress that very, very much support the transfer of a bodies for study out of Peru to then be brought back as soon as the studies are done. And I think ideally that would be a great way to do it, is to take preferably bodies, more than one, to university. I would prefer to see a university environment more than anything else, for a lot of reasons, which, I mean, it's all the classic ones, but I would like to see a university do it. And I think more than one body would be best. If you could have one body, that's just me, shooting from the hip, I would say either Maria or Montserrat. But if we only got one, I would say it would need to be one of the humanoid type species, like the ones you just mentioned. I think those, I found those to be the most interesting. But if we could have several, why not? It's just expensive to do it too. I mean, we've put together a protocol on what a team of docs have suggested be done to determine what they are, and we've kind of put together a good, better, best, and it's probably going to be in the range of about $2 million to do everything. That was the estimated amount from the team of experts. Is $2 million would be kind of the middle range of what we'd be looking at for 2 to 3 bodies, to get answers that we wanted. But certainly you could spend millions. Hopefully there'll be universities and organizations that are willing to, donate their own time and expertise and instruments, because I think somebody's gonna be getting some PhDs, off this work. Hopefully, some doctoral theses could certainly be written on the study of these bodies. So, I think there's some real worth to it, to have them studied. And I think, hopefully some universities in the future would be very interested in doing that work.
So another question I've been getting a lot is regarding the atom specimen that you and your father were allowed to study in Mexico. That looks like the Atacama-like specimen
Yeah.
that was discovered. What was your experience with that specimen, and what do you think about that specimen? And you and I both know that there's DNA work more than likely happening on that specimen. What do you think we may learn? Do you think that might be a unique discovery?
Yeah. So for those who don't know, there's a very small body in Monterrey, Mexico. It's kind of in almost like a fetal position. It's kind of curled up. It's about, I'd say, the size of a racquetball. On my Twitter, I posted a picture of it. I did. I wrote a couple articles about it on a website I had, and I had seen a question about the my other website, and I'll tell you, it got hacked 3 times, and I put all kinds of security on it, and it kept getting hacked, and I was just like, screw it, so I took it down. Um, but I did write about Adam quite a bit on that site. I may pull them and put them on my other website, which is my law firm's website. But my search engine optimization guys are always mad at me every time I put a mummy article up because they say it's bad for my SEO. So I get my hand slapped every time I do it. But I still like to write about it. So maybe I'll put them somewhere else. And that's why I had the other website to begin with, is I kept getting yelled at for writing about mummies on a law website. Um, but Adam is very, very interesting. It, like I said, about the size of a racquetball, doesn't weigh anything. But we were able to take Adam to, oddly enough, the best CT machine that we could find in the area that was available was at a vet's office, at a veterinarian's office. And so we took the body to the veterinarian and X-rayed it, CT'd it, um, and it's real. It's a once formerly living organism. Now, is it like Atacama in the sense, and for those who don't know, Atacama, it's just called Ata or Atacama, is from the Atacama Desert in Chile. And it was a body that's about 6 inches tall. And this is the one that was studied by Gary Nolan and is in the movie Sirius. Or you can just look up the Atacama body. Um, and it's very strange looking. Please do look it up if you're not familiar with it. It's got a pointed head, and it's just it's humanoid, but has a lot of differences. And Adam looks very similar to Atta, a little smaller. Now Gary Nolan says that the Atacama being was a human that was born. Going back to Adam is very interesting. There's a website. It's called Adam Alien. I think it's maybe .com.
Yeah, it's made by
And
the owner.
yeah, and it's a fascinating little creature, and it's a real thing. It's not a construction or anything of that nature. As I said, we CT'd it, we X-rayed it, and it looks very similar to Atacama. And once again, I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself because I got cut out, so I don't remember what everybody caught. But the Atacama being was analyzed by Gary Nolan at Stanford, and he says that it's human, and that it had, I think it was 62, if I'm not mistaken, different genetic abnormalities. And so it wouldn't have been a viable, living creature with all those, based on its size. It's tiny. It's about 6 inches tall. But there's some very strange things. I mean, he also said it appeared to be 6 years old from some tests they did on it. And there's no way that this, if it's a human, there's no way in my mind that that would have been a viable pregnancy, and that that creature, if human, could have survived, because it's teeny tiny, 6 inches tall, skinny, very strange head. It certainly would have been a miscarriage, if if it was in fact a human. Now, I've talked to the owner of that body as well. I have not seen it; it's in Spain, but I've talked to the owner of that body, and had some interesting conversations. Um, and Adam is something that could it be something similar? Could it be a human fetus that had many genetic abnormalities, and it was a miscarriage? Potentially, I don't know. Gonzalo, I have seen the DNA work on it, and it's interesting. So it has been done. It was done in Asia,
Yeah,
but
I was asking
uh,
just to see if you would say it.
yeah, no, I've seen the DNA workup on it, but more needs to be done in my estimation. Um, and there's reasons why that I could get into at a later date. But it's a very interesting thing. Now, why was this found in a cave? It was found. There's a If anyone's ever been to Monterey before, Monterey it's a great city. Incredible food. It's not too far from Texas. It's in northern Mexico, and it's surrounded by these mountains that are just gorgeous. It sets in this low area surrounded by mountains, and there's this mountain called Sierra de la Mitra, which it's mitre, which is like a pope's hat, like a mitre, because it's shaped in that kind of shape, and it's rises up really quick and surrounds the city. There's quite a few of these, and it was said to have been found in a cave by a spelunker, a gentleman named Edu, who is a cave explorer up in that area, that says he found it in kind of like in the wall of the cave. Said he saw something hanging out, which turned out to be the elbow. Thought it was maybe a bat, like a body of a dead bat. And he kind of, poked at the wall with his fingers a little bit, started pulling it out, but it was dark in the cave and he didn't know what he had. He brings it out because he was going to scare his hiking companion with it, because he thought it was the corpse of a bat. And as he got outside the cave where the light was better, realized it was not a bat at all. It was this creature, this atom, that's very humanoid. And he tells me that he's seen living ones of this. He spelunks up in those caves all the time, and I've talked to him at length, and he says, nope, they live up there. I've seen them. He's seen evidence of how they live and where they live, and there's a lot of interesting mythology, new mythology surrounding these things. But it's a fascinating little area with lots of UFO sightings, and Monterey's it's a really cool place. If you haven't been, go. The food is excellent. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. I really enjoyed my time in Monterey.
Thank you, Josh. Yeah, that part of he's seen evidence that they're still living and seen potential houses. When I was talking to him, blew my mind because I was like, that is more than just a dead corpse at that point. And we have some like some speaker questions. Would you be cool answering some?
Fire away. Let's do it.
All right. Android Paranormal, would you like to unmute your mic and ask your question?
Hey everyone, thanks for having the space, and thanks to Josh for taking some questions and for all your work. My question that kind of came up was when you were talking about how your website, one of your websites kept getting hacked. So that kind of piqued my curiosity. Have you encountered any other, what I would call, suspicious obstacles to your research and investigation personally? And then a two-part, have you encountered or witnessed any other suspicious obstacles that others directly involved have, encountered as well.
Yeah, I have. I mean, maybe the website getting hacked. I'm not going to read too much into it, and I'm a pretty level-headed guy. Um, Generally, I'm not a conspiracy theorist or prone to exaggeration. At least I don't believe so. Maybe my wife would tell you different, but I yes, I've have heard from a lot of people that things have happened to them, and I don't feel comfortable talking at length about things, but I would say many things. In a year and a half that obstacles, sure, I guess is a one way to say it, but you know, stuff that I'm not used to dealing with, have, come our way, both, to some of my friends, and to myself, certainly. Um, some of it, more direct than others. But uh, I mean, I've got it all, and I've shared it with people close to me. But it's stuff that I don't love talking about in recorded spaces too much. But you know, I'm I'm aware of things, and just remain aware of the situation. You monitor it, and um, you know, I wish honestly that this was an easier thing to do. That people would just all kind of say, "Hey, let's get answers. Let's work together, and let's everyone." I know it's not a hold of hands and a kumbaya thing where it's going to be that easy, but I would hope that you know. I don't know why anybody's opposed to just kind of getting to the bottom of things, and doing it the right way. That's the biggest frustration for me. A lot of the other stuff I think is noise, and I try not to pay too much attention to it.
Thank you.
I
Megan,
hope
would
I
you like to
answered your
ask your
question.
question?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks so much, Josh, for coming in to talk to us. I guess kind of on a similar topic, like I've been surprised by the number of people, even in our kind of like fringe corner of things, that just dismiss and are not interested in these things. I'd be curious if y'all have tried to kind of talk to maybe some of these people, or, I mean, I saw Gary Nolan on Rogan just recently, and he, was kind of favorable towards the mummies, which was interesting to me. But yeah, I would just be curious to get your take on that, and maybe why, if you've talked to our community, and if so, what your take is.
Yeah, and thanks, Megan. I appreciate it. Thanks for coming and listening, and I know I've kind of rambled. It's kind of an interesting format. I've never done one of these before, so
It's been
hopefully
great.
this.
I'm an OG
Thanks,
Mummy
guys.
fan, and I am so thrilled to be talking to you. Sorry to interrupt, but I just want to say thank you so much. Go ahead. Sorry.
Heck yeah. No, it's totally cool. Totally cool. I, I want to share as much as I can because it's something that I've really become passionate about. And I just think it's the coolest thing out there that, if watch any of these, paranormal things, these Bigfoot or ghosts or whatever, it's always like people going through a forest and be like, "Oh, I heard something." But this is different. We have things and they can be tested and they're real and they're physical. And that's why this is so interesting to me. That's why Adam is so interesting to me, because they're real, tangible things that can be tested and we can get answers. Even if it's a prosaic explanation, let's get answers. But let me get to your question. So, I prefer the word frontier instead of fringe. I always kind of make a joke about that because I do think that a lot of these topics, of things that I've looked at, like once again, 2 years ago, I wasn't into this sort of thing. I wasn't, going to conferences for, whatever, or, um, in the circles that I've kind of found myself in now, where I have met a lot of interesting people. I did speak to Dr. Greer for a long time. He's not somebody I ever would have spoken to previously. I did speak to Eric Burleson. Consider Danny Sheehan a friend now. I mean, I've met a lot of really interesting people in the past couple of years, and um, believers, non-believers, and I don't even know where I find myself on a lot of these things, because a lot of people want to talk to me about, well, Josh, what about UFOs and what about that? And I'm like, well, that's not, I've never been in that field. I'm not somebody who's found myself in those um, areas of study previously. And that's not even where I really see the mummies, to be honest. I don't, a lot of people make the connection, and maybe I'm open to things, but that's, my position is, let's test them, let's find out what they are. And then we can start, doing more conjecture on, the who, what, when, where, why, and how, these things are. So yeah, is it interesting to me that people are believers or non-believers or whatever? I mean, a lot of times when I meet somebody, they do want to talk to me about their philosophy of what the mummies are. And I always like to listen because I think it's interesting. I think it gives you a lot of insight into someone's thought process. It's a way to make friends and to get to know somebody a little bit better. So I think that's cool. But that's a recurring theme, is that when I meet people, they want to talk to me about what they think. And I think it's cool to hear it and to kind of get a little bit of insight. And so I've had that conversation with a lot of different people. And, I'm not trying to, Megan, convince anybody of anything. I, in a weird way, and I don't mean to say this rude, it's like, I don't really care what they think because I don't think it matters. I don't mean that in a rude way. Like, I don't care what you think. I mean it in a way of like, it doesn't really matter. It's what the science tells us. And, what the DNA comes back as, and the carbon 14, and, you name it, all the different modalities. That's what's going to give us answers. And then once we learn some more, then, that maybe that next round of speculation is, well, heck, they're this. What does that mean? And, if they turn out, I mean, because I've seen some of the early DNA work, and it's green bean, and there's some Southeast Asian DNA, and why is there green bean in there? Is it because they were wrapped in green bean leaves, or who knows? That's kind of my theory. But, there's a lot of things out there that don't make sense. And part of my investigation in this is trying to, figure out answers that make sense. And there's huge puzzle pieces missing when we don't have the imaging modalities and the DNA and what I consider good carbon 14, etc. Those are the biggest puzzle pieces that'll help us understand a lot more about it.
Yeah, I really appreciate your take. And I'm actually kind of in a similar boat, I guess I would say, which is like, I had never really considered myself an out there woo type person. I'm pretty grounded in science and all of that. And these just kind of broke some paradigms open for me. I guess kind of a little bit of a follow up. Would you say that when you talk to people who are, whoever, the Danny Sheehans, people in the community, because like they've been pretty quiet overall about this. Do you think that there's been a generally like open-minded perspective, or what's kind of your take on what the reception has been from these people that you've met, would you say?
I mean, it's all over the board, of course, Megan. I mean, every time I was talking to Danny, he wanted to talk, he's a lawyer like I am, wanted to talk shop, and then I wanted to talk about JFK. So, cause he has some interesting insights on that, but, um, you know, it's all over the map. I think the one thing that I see time and time again is is when I meet new people that are in this space, and because I've been meeting them because a lot of different ways, I'll say. Like even at that Bugosphere conference that I went to in Mexico City, there was, a lot of people that, and I'm sure most of you have seen the pictures or the photographs of the people that were in attendance, and it was an interesting group. I mean, Paula Harris, and if you guys don't know who Paula Harris is, look her up, read some of her work. I mean, she is, if you want to talk about OGs in the UFO community, she's one of them, and she's awesome, and she has got stories you wouldn't believe. She is the coolest, and she actually lives not too far from where I grew up in Boulder, Colorado, and she's great, and just a wealth of information. Jaime Maussan has been studying, I mean, there's another OG. He's been studying, UFOs and paranormal for 50 years. And so, I mean, that guy's incredible to talk to. The stories that man can tell are just bananas. And just, he's also really funny too. And maybe that doesn't come across as when you watch him on TV or whatever, but he's like a funny dude. Like he's legitimately like fun to talk to, and he's got a great personality. But a lot of these people, um, they're curious minds, I think, is what a lot of them have in common, and they want to explore, and I think that's really cool. That's a really cool human trait or quality I think people have that are interested in this is curiosity.
Thank you for your question, Megan. Do you want to ask your question, Ben? And then we'll go with Zach.
Yes, please. How you doing? My question, basically, I'll try and keep it short. Will more samples come forward? Who is looking for them? What authorities control the area? Are archaeologists able to get in? And who is spearheading the new discoveries of bodies?
Yeah. So as the story goes, and this is hard because we're getting information. There's one source of information, and that's Leandro Rivera, who's also known as Mario. And Mario gives us a lot of the information about what was there, what was found. I can tell you that the story goes, everything's been removed, and it's no longer there. That there were over 100 bodies. I personally have seen over a dozen, and that includes some body parts, but I've seen about a dozen bodies. And I've seen photos of many, many more. So I know they're out there. I believe it to be true. I've got pretty good recollection of what I've seen and what's new and what's different. And there's a lot of different morphologies. I would say probably 7 as I count them. Um, people say, well, the S type, J type, whatever. I don't like those terms, but there's a lot of types if we're going to use, of the species, and they're not the same species at all. But so the bodies have been removed and moved to a different location. It's tough because some of the bodies are at the University of Ica. Some of the bodies are in private collections. I do know that there's bodies all over the world because these have been sold to collectors on the 4 corners of the earth. There's quite a few still in Peru in private collections. But it's an interesting thing because these bodies kind of lie in a little bit of a gray area of, are they cultural patrimony? Are they not? We have people in the Ministry of Culture. We have people in the prosecutor's office. Take Flavio Estrada, for example, who has, repeatedly said they're fake, they're manufactured. And it was, if you haven't seen the congressional hearing, go watch it. And and watch him, watch his face during the presentation by the doctors who've studied it to show you how seriously he takes it, which is not at all, and very dismissive of everything. And big media picked that up. Reuters and AP and everything was running "Mummies are a hoax" headlines. And that was, in my belief, exactly what they were hoping would happen, is let's show some dolls dressed up in, stupid, pink dresses and whatever, and flip-flops, and show these to the world and say, nothing to see here, these are fake. And so the questions you ask are been a great question. And I understand most of the answers, and it's not easy to get a grip on that, because that's one of the toughest scenarios in this whole case, is where were they? Where did they come from? Where are they now? What's the future?
The other thing is, sorry to interrupt, but
No.
you said earlier there's a guy who reckons he's seen them alive. What's to say we don't get him to show us where he's seen them?
So that was in Mexico. That was when I was talking about the Atom creature in Monterey. And I know exactly where they were in that situation. But I will tell you this, in addition to what you just said, there are quite a few. I can think of 3 off the top of my head, instances of people saying that they've seen creatures similar to the Nazca bodies alive in Peru. And I've heard stories that there's more, but I can think of 3 off the top of my head. How reliable? I mean, I don't know. It's, it's hearsay. It's, eyewitness testimony, which, I'm a trial attorney, and we know how reliable that is. Not reliable is the answer. But several witnesses have said, hey, I've seen these things and live and walking. So I don't know. I certainly haven't. And I can't speak on it with any sort of credibility other than to say, yeah, I've heard the stories. That's in Peru, like in the Nazca Ica Palpa region. I don't know. So
Can I just do a little follow up to that? Because coming from Mexico, there's a constant fear that this being a third world country, and pretty much every country in Latin America there's always this problem of corruption, and there's always this problem of these criminal organizations being potentially involved with governments. And I know that the Huaqueros are basically considered a mafia there. Do you have any fears that you can talk about, or any reservations that you can talk about, of the potential that some parts of the government might be involved with the black market down there?
Well, I mean, is the question, do I feel comfortable talking about it? No.
Yeah, or anything you can like.
No, I don't feel comfortable.
So there is a fear there.
Well, look, is it real? If the first question is that an accurate thing that's happening, and is it real? The answer is yes and hell yes. And is it a legitimate concern? Yes and hell yes. Should you take these concerns seriously if you're involved in this? Yes. Do I want to speak on it much more than that? No.
No, but I did need to ask you about this because people need to know what your position is. So thank you. I won't ask you anymore. But thank you, man.
Yeah.
Hey Ben, I added a picture of Adam on I guess, the comments for this space so you can see how he looks. And Zach and Hollow, you're free to ask your questions. Zach, you're first.
Thank you, Gonzalo, for hosting. And love your work, Pavel. And a quick shout out to Ed Casas as well, the Tridactyls account. This question's for Josh, though. You mentioned seeing dinosaur-like bodies earlier in this space. Can you expand on that in any way? Whether you think they're real or fake, insofar as those terms are contextually appropriate? Because I've casually wondered myself before if the giant hands, as seen on the Alien Project site, maybe they source to something more like a theropod or pterosaur or a giant chicken, rather than the 20-foot tall dude we're all imagining.
Yeah, great thoughts. So when I said dinosaur previously, what I was talking about was not a body, it was carvings. There's ceramics and stones that are carved in like the shape of like, a brontosaurus or a brachiosaurus, long tail, long neck, four legs, that were being sold as artifacts that were found in the cave. So I haven't seen any bones or bodies that would be dinosaur-like. I mean, the only thing I've seen is like Suye, which is, maybe reptilian. I mean, it's hard to say because it doesn't really match up with any kind of, animal that we know of. There's nothing like it in the fossil record, but there's pictures of it. I mean, they're easy to find on the Inkari website. And I think Gonzalo, do you have some pictures of those on the Tridactyls website?
I don't have a Psuye because I was waiting on CT scans just because I want to have data that people can see for themselves before
Okay.
adding them on.
So the bodies are different sizes, maybe, I don't know, 18 to 20 inches, 16 inches. They're small and they're very lightweight and they're very skinny, but they're tridactyl too. They have 3 fingers and toes. And they have, at least the ones I've seen, Gonzalo called them proto wings, which is probably a good way of saying it. They almost look like fins. They're small, maybe like an inch and a half, in the middle of the back, sticking out. If you Google Suye, which is Suyay, it should pop up like Suye Nazca mummy. I have a lot of photos of that body too. Um, I mean, I don't know. It's just it doesn't make sense. I don't want to say dinosaur like. Like I said, one of our docs said it looked more reptilian than anything. Had a neck kind of like the vertebrae of a turtle. Was the remark that I remember off the top of my head. Um, I, I didn't inquire further. That was just a comment that was made. But yeah, I mean, so no dinosaur bodies, Zach. Just carvings or like little ceramics, like effigies of dinosaur-like. At least to me, like a brontosaurus or brachiosaurus type effigy.
I hope you don't mind. I threw a couple pictures of Suye up in the nest just so we can all know what we're talking about.
Thanks, Megan. And you're free to go next, Hollow.
Thank you, Gonzalo. Thanks for coming out, Josh, and que paso, Pavel. I'm glad to see you all in the space, and we're tackling I think, some pretty serious issues here. I hope I'm not taking us to something we've already covered, but I'd love to dial into some of the DNA work that's been done, how we can utilize what's there so far. I mean, I totally would love to help push to get more samples. However that could be done, through public funding or otherwise. But from what we have already done, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Dr. Konstantin, what was his name, Korotkov,
Yeah.
do a sample? What was that through? I know Gaia had somehow funded him, and I was looking for the actual, the data that you could, even extract in a JSON file and then use this in the AlphaFold, protein AI, and try to do a comparative analysis between some of the different DNA results and see what kind of overlaps, and, we could maybe whittle out some of the noise as well that way. Did you ever get a chain of custody with Dr. Korotkov on any of that information or track that down at all?
So Let me ask Gonzalo: Is Korotakov's DNA on?
No, it's not. It's they took Maria, Wawita, and Victoria, and none of that data is public.
Okay, so
But there is like the one that's up on NCBI, but I don't think that's the one that Constantine did.
it's not. It's different. Um, I'm going to try to say this the politest way possible. Um, the my thought on what's been done so far is it's almost a it's a garbage in, garbage out uh, type of scenario. With ancient DNA, it really, and I'm not an ancient DNA expert, but I've listened to a lot of ancient DNA experts explain this to me, and it needs to be done in a very specific fashion. So if I misstate anything I'm about to say, it's because I'm not an expert on it and I don't claim to be. I've only talked to experts. And number one, it needs to be done in a clean room. It needs to be done um, from bone, a tooth, a long bone, something of that nature. What I have seen done in the past is tissue samples, like skin, like external tissue samples, and that haven't been done to the level of they call it runs, right? Of the runs done from the right samples, from the right location, taken in the right facility, transported in the right manner, and done at the right with the right instruments and the right expertise. So once again, I used the example before where it's like, well, okay, we have DNA at the scene of a crime or a rape kit or something of that nature. It's different DNA than we're talking about with ancient DNA. It's got to be done very differently. And so, yes, there's going to be noise and there's going to be contamination. There's chain of custody issues. There's so many issues with it that it needs to be done all over. And so I just say we start at square one and we do it the right way the next time. You let the experts take it. You let the experts record it. You let the experts on the best machines and the best experts in the world run the DNA. And then you cross-check it. And you have from a different lab with different experts do the exact same thing. And then look at each other's work. You don't just take a toenail or a piece of skin off the hip and ship it off to a lab and say, okay, what is this thing? That's not how it's done. And that's why it's been very tricky is because, that's illegal. That stuff wasn't done the right way. It was it was against Peruvian laws. It was against United States laws. And so you can't move organic material. That's pre-Columbian, and this is certainly pre-Columbian. At least I would assume it's pre-Columbian. And so that's kind of part of the trick is doing it legally, getting good answers and legally. So you could run as many tests as you want on DNA that's been done previously, but you're not going to get anywhere, is my opinion. It just needs to be square one. Take it the right way, test it the right way, move it the right way, peer review it the right way, start over.
My only response to that would be, I think the Russians are probably pretty decent when it comes to some of this, but it's too bad that it's not made public because from what I've gathered, even if a small amount of what they've gathered is true, it's a major deviation from anything in our genome bank, which would include, for example, any type of contamination that we would have already registered on the genome bank would be easily deductive from the sample, even if it was, say, spoiled in this case. Unless you're spoiling it with ancient DNA, chances are it wouldn't muddy the water, so to speak. But, that's just something to consider in hindsight. We definitely need to take more samples, and hopefully we can create that opportunity through some public pressure on getting some answers on that.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think it would be, you hear all these complaints about like, let's just get answers and why can't we? And you could do this. And, you know, trust me when I tell you that the people that have been working on this for years know a lot more than, keyboard, you know, denizens. I mean, it's like, we get it. We know. We want answers too, but there's certain protocols and laws and, things that have to be done the right way. And so you've got to be a little bit creative, and you've got to hope that, sometimes the powers that be are willing to collaborate, or, because do I trust, anybody to do it the right way? Well, yeah, I certainly trust certain groups to do it the right way, but they haven't been given the opportunity yet, to do it. And so it gets tricky.
Hey, Gonzalo, real quick, how does this compare? Like, if I'm just looking at we'll just take the Russians at face value for a second on this. And some of the data I have here is Maria had 5,700 unique genetic variants not found in modern human genomes, while Wawita had 3,096 such variants as compared to the 1,000 Genomes Project database. How does that compare with the one they did more locally?
So I am not an expert in DNA. Alan is. He's not on this call though. So I wouldn't know how to answer that question. For me, the best answer that they're not human is their fingerprints, just because it's completely different from humans. I think Dr. David Ruiz Vela is correct that releasing those pictures of the fingerprints would be the best way to show to people that they're not human because of the funding that it's necessary for DNA studies. And that's why if you go to my website, I've been trying to add as many pictures of the DNA just so people can see that in my opinion is the best evidence. But when it comes to DNA studies, that's not something I'm into. I'm just a programmer.
Ancient DNA
Well,
is so tricky. And I would also just add, like, how often do you end up with the most knowledgeable people begging for more studies to be done as in-depth as possible? Like, I don't know, man. Sorry.
That's
Uh,
no, you're right on, Megan.
Josh, I had a few more questions, and then anybody else has any more, we can just end the call. Anybody else doesn't have any questions, but mine were, when you went to Mexico, you were allowed to see the Bugosphere. What was your experience taking a look at that artifact or that device? Were you able to take a look into the equator and take a look at the optical fibers? Were you impressed? One of the things that I've been told from people who, from the group that you and I talked to, is that the device is much colder than they would assume. It is heavier than they would assume. Did you get that same experience? Did you think it was unique?
Yeah. So, and once again, a lot of the time, so this is out there. I probably don't have to repeat this, but I will. I'm just talking as a guy sometimes. I'm not an expert on floating Colombian spheres, metallic spheres, and so please take it as just some dude who happened to see it, personally. And yeah, I've held it, and it weighed about 20 pounds, 19, 20 pounds. It's heavy. It's about the size of a bowling ball, maybe a little bit bigger. It is cold to the touch. You know, some smart Alex, when I had mentioned that on a post where, oh, metal's cold. And I'm like, yeah, it was colder than you'd expect it to be. It was actually was quite cold. But, metal's cold. The symbology on it appeared hand carved. It was not intricate at all. It was, very rough. And that's for all the carvings. It appeared hand done. You think, at least for me, and this is me talking, I think that if you're having something that, can fly without any propulsion or mechanism that's visible, that you'd think it would be very high tech, and you'd expect to see all these really high tech things on it, which I didn't see. I thought it was kind of crude in the designs on it. One of the docs that was, I think he's from UNAM, which is the University of Mexico City. At least I think he was. He introduced himself, but I met so many people. He had a little microscope thing and he put up and was, put it up to the holes that are along the equator of it and was showing me what he thought were, some sort of, tubing or, I don't know. But I mean, I saw them. I don't know what they are. I can't speak on that. There was little small things in there that you could see through the microscope, but I can't speak intelligently on what those were.
Android, do you want to ask your next question?
Yes, thank you. Kind of a similar follow-up to my question I asked earlier, Josh, about how you encountered, let's just call it, suspicious obstacles, right? And that you've witnessed others encounter the same who've been directly involved with researching it. Do you think that also plays a big factor in, let's say, accredited individuals and institutions not wanting to get involved because they see and hear and witness people who are already involved encountering that, and so it scares them away, wanting to not deal with it, not wanting to ruin their career, and et cetera?
Well, I mean, you'd have to ask every individual that, I think. But let me say, I think there's a stigma involved in frontier. We're using the word frontier instead of fringe, right? In frontier topics, I think there's a stigma, and I think it scares people off. I mean, maybe that more than some of the other obstacles. I mean, getting serious scientists involved in things, and you've seen this with John Mack at Harvard. I mean, he's the classic example of what Harvard did to Dr. Mack, because he was studying, different UFO cases and things of that nature where it was, career suicide for him. And I think for other docs, other serious people who've spent their careers and decades and lives and, lots of money and time and, built their careers on things, they're a little scared to touch certain topics. But as I've talked to doctors about this, and as more have come on, I say the same thing, which is follow the science. It doesn't, if someone says to me, well, I'm scared of, like, just study it and relay the data. And if the data says it's something normal and prosaic, then say it. If it's something weird, then say it. You don't have to do anything other than what the science is telling you. And you can't be scared of finding these things out. If these are new, original, unique, somebody's, going to get some big grants. Somebody's going to get some, big prizes and awards in the industry or in their fields. And that's, how science goes forward, is I think that people are willing to maybe step out of the box and take a chance here and there on things that are frontier to get answers. And I don't know. I mean, that stuff's interesting to me. And like I've said, I've, was never into this stuff before. And now I've seen some stuff that just doesn't make any sense. And it's interesting that there's, as I was saying earlier in the talk, it's what I have been convinced of is we haven't found everything, because I keep seeing stuff that we certainly don't have. And there's a lot of that out there, and it's cool. It's really interesting, and it's nice to find out about. But I think the bigger issue, to answer your question I rambled, but is there's a stigma, I think, with looking at things that are out of the ordinary.
And Josh, my last question would be, would you ever testify in the U.S. Congress? Do you think you and your father would ever testify about the tridactyl discovery in the United States? Because, in my opinion, it's the best evidence of non-human intelligence discovered, especially when we look at the fingerprints, the anatomical structure. I believe that there is good enough evidence to suggest that we may not be alone. And I don't know if you would testify in the U.S. Congress about that stuff.
Well, Gonzalo, I'm not going to dodge a federal subpoena. So, I mean, if they subpoena me, I'll show up with bells on. I'll tell the truth. But, I don't know. I haven't been asked. So, and, they know where to find me. I'm an easy guy to find. So, yeah, of course I would. Yeah, happily.
Awesome,
Such a
bro.
good lawyer answer. So good.
Does anybody else have any questions before we end this space?
I did want to say one thing to Android's last question, which maybe you remember this as well, Gonzalo. When we did a space with Dr. Zalce last summer, I asked him about if he had faced blowback, and he was, for anyone who doesn't know, the head of the forensics for the Mexican Navy, and he alluded to, but didn't want to go into it too much, that he had definitely faced some career blowback. So I do think that there's some definite not just stigma, but real consequences for people who are willing to go out on a limb and put their professional credentials behind this kind of thing. And part of why I very much appreciate you coming and talking to us in this space, Josh. It's been absolutely lovely to have you here.
Oh, cool. I'm
Yeah,
happy to. I'm happy to, guys.
yeah. Thanks for. I just surprised you one day. I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna do a Twitter post saying who do people want to talk to," and then the next day I bugged you. Hey, what do you do a Twitter space with me? So thank you for doing it, Josh.
Happy to do it, my man.
Yeah, you take care, brother. You guys take
All right,
care.
guys.
Adios.
Good talking, everybody. Good talking.
Josh, thank you
Good talking
for
to you, bro.
answering my questions, even though they were a bit out there. Didn't mean to put you on the spot or anything. I just wanted to ask you some of those things because you're a lawyer and you're real close to the discovery. So thank you, man.
No worries, buddy. Happy to help the best I can. Sorry when I'm obtuse about certain things.
No
No, you're
worries,
good.
guys.
You're good. You're good.
All right. All right, everybody. Hey, have a great night. Thanks for everybody for listening. And if you don't follow me already, do. I'll be posting some pretty cool stuff coming up in the near future. So stay tuned.
Awesome. Later, guys.
Bye,
Love it.
everybody.
Thanks for hosting, Gonzalo. Thanks for coming, Josh.
You're welcome.
Yep.